Hi, this is Group 6. My name is Sarah. Me and my group members, Colin, Carl, and John, will discuss the group case study of Starbucks. So a little outline about what we will be talking about tonight. We'll go over the history of Starbucks and the SWOT analysis that we had conducted, and also talk about the strategies, structure control systems, and social responsibility and ethics of the company. We will then close with a financial analysis and recommendations whether or not to buy or not buy our stock. So a little history about the company. Starbucks was founded in 1971 by three businessmen, Jerry Baldwin, Zev Siegel, and Gordon Bauer. These three men had came together and named the first Starbucks store after the first mate in the film and novel Moby Dick. So in 1971, when Starbucks started selling their coffee, they had originated it in Seattle's Pike Place Market in Seattle, Washington. Just 11 years later, in 1982, Starbucks had expanded to 5 stores, a roasting facility where Starbucks roasted their own beans, and a wholesale business to allow for restaurants to sell their products. During the time of expansion, Howard Schultz was hired as the sales and marketing manager of the company. He was previously a well-known VP of US operations for a Swedish company, so Starbucks had high hopes in him to come in and turn the company's profits around. On a buying trip that Schultz was on in Italy, he had a vision for the future. He thought of introducing these espresso bars or coffee bars, which would allow for a new environment for customers to drink their coffee and socialize with friends. When Schultz brought this idea to the founders, they weren't on board because they didn't want to enter into the restaurant business. But in 1986, they had opened their first coffee bar called El Grenaille. And a year later, Starbucks had sold this to Schultz for $4 million, and this is now what we know as Starbucks today. So to start, Starbucks' business strategy of slow growth to allow for a steady foundation was well seen in the year 1991, after the company had experienced losses for 3 years, which almost doubled in the millions. Starbucks had refused to franchise their stores because Schultz wanted to remain in control of all of their locations. However, just a few years later, their sales had shot up again, up to 84%, and analysts had predicted that Starbucks' revenue would top $1 billion in the year 2000. These revenues were very understated because in the year 2000, Starbucks had actually topped $2 billion in revenue, and they were continually growing. A few years later, in 2009, sales had declined for the first time in Starbucks' history, and Starbucks was in a huge crisis. This, mixed with the competition and the current recession they were in, made the Starbucks' market decline. But in a few years, Starbucks had picked up their sales and had increased to the company that they are today. So the main problem in Starbucks' case was the lack of diversification in the early 2000s, which caused their expansion to be unsuccessful at first. In Starbucks' early years, they lacked diversification because they had strict policies on franchising, and Schultz wanted Starbucks to remain in control. As time went on, Starbucks had loosened these policies and saturated every market that they entered. This is because Starbucks had failed to adapt to the different cultures of locations that they were expanding to, because they didn't offer the products and services that were required in that location, which caused them to lose their unique cafe experience, which was the original reason how Starbucks gained their competitive advantage. Now, Carl will discuss SWOT analysis and the business strategies of the company.
Hi, thank you, Sarah, for the introduction. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about the strengths and weaknesses of Starbucks. The strengths are brand reputation. What I mean by brand reputation is that you see the logo and you know you're in Starbucks, you're going to get a great tasting coffee, and you know the customer service is going to be awesome. Supply chain. In the early days when Starbucks had first started, they partnered with a bunch of small farmers down in Colombia to secure the Arabica bean. Before that, European and Japanese countries wanted that bean really bad, so they sought after it. So it was really hard for the Americans to get it, but Starbucks managed to do that in a one fell swoop. They also had mills right next to the farms, so they can go ahead and harvest the bean and distribute it up to their warehouses in the United States and Netherlands, where they further processed it and roasted the beans there. Diversification through subsidies. So what they did was that they went out and bought a French bakery to incorporate fresh baked goods in their stores. They bought Trivia Teas and Evolution Fresh. Moving on over to weaknesses, one of the weaknesses that we've seen that in the report is that rapid growth. And in 2008, 2009, the market in the United States was pretty much saturated, and they realized it. So what they had to do is they had to shut down some 900 stores. But while doing so, they also looked externally to other countries for expansion. Another weakness that plagues Starbucks is that the high prices for their coffee. I don't know about you, but I really wouldn't want to pay $5 for a cup of coffee, but I know people that would pay up to $10 for a cup of coffee. So I guess people would go ahead and do it. But one of the areas that they're missing is the lower income people. They don't have disposable incomes where they can go buy these coffees. So they're missing out on that group of people. And then imitation's the third weakness that I've looked at and seen. Anybody can make a coffee. I mean, Dunkin' Donuts, McDonald's, 7-Eleven, they all make coffee. So it's really to imitate the coffee. Going on to opportunities and threats. Opportunities is expanding to other markets. There's a huge market down in, well, Africa's a big country, so I'm pretty sure there's a huge market down there they can go ahead and move into. And there's also Japan and Europe. They've already started in Europe, but I think they can expand a little more there. Partners with the other firms, like I said before, in Europe and in Japan, they used the Arabica beans before, so they know how to process them. So they should partner with other firms inside those countries. Diversification. Starbucks is one of the coffee shops that actually had drive-throughs, so you can go up and go up there, drive in, get your coffee, and continue on. But they also have, when you go to their stores, they have the ambiance where you go and you can sit down and relax and enjoy your coffee. Some of the threats is strong competition for low cost. Like I said earlier, there's other companies out there that can make coffee just like Starbucks, but they don't have, the Arabica bean, but they do have a lower price point, so they get those customers. And imitation, again, anybody can make coffee. It's just how it is. Now we'll go ahead and move on into the business level strategy. Starbucks business strategy is focused, but I also think it's differentiated. And the reason why I say it's differentiated because when you go into Starbucks, you get great customer service. So when you walk in there, they want to make you feel like you're part of the family. If they make a mistake in your coffee, you point it out, they put you right in front of the head of the line, and it's a done deal. Comfort, I touched on briefly about comfort earlier. They want you to come in, sit down, relax, enjoy your coffee, surf the internet because they do offer free Wi-Fi. So that's why I think what makes Starbucks a little more differentiated between all the other coffee houses out there. And now I'll go ahead and turn it over to Colin so he can go ahead and give you the corporate level strategy.
Thank you, Carl. Okay, for corporate level strategy, I'm going to start with the mission statement: to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one person, one cup, and one neighborhood at a time. Now, this mission statement was introduced in 2008. That's when Starbucks was really hitting a crisis. Their stores weren't doing too well. They had expanded too quickly, and they introduced this mission statement to kind of revive the company. Now, they did this in order to support related diversification. Now, what that entails is Starbucks using their core competencies in order to successfully integrate their key acquisitions. These key acquisitions allowed Starbucks to introduce new products from La Boulange, Teavana, and Evolution Fresh. Now, these companies were acquired and integrated in 2011 and 2012. You can see by the graph that from 2009 to 2011, coffee made up about 63% of Starbucks' overall revenue. You can see that change from 2012 to 2015 when coffee only took up around 57% of total revenue for those years. You can also see that from 2009 to 2011, they had constant revenue growth of about 1 billion per year. Now, from 2012 to 2015, their revenue started growing at around 2 billion per year. So you can see that these acquisitions and expansion really helped Starbucks grow. For globalization strategy, we identified it as transnationalism. Now, the first part of transnationalism is local responsiveness, successfully responding to the new customers' desires and tastes. How they would do this is partnering with local firms in this new region in order to properly introduce the brand and company to the new area. They would do this with the design of the store, the product mix, and the marketing. So you'll see by the pictures on the bottom, the outside of a Starbucks coffee in China very much reflects the culture and common designs in China. If you look on the inside, at first glance, you may not see much, but if you take a closer look, you'll see that the design of the walls and the light fixtures and the counters successfully reflect Chinese culture. And if you look even closer, you'll see that how chairs and tables are set up are meant to be for group settings. So with chairs facing each other, the Chinese really like to meet in groups, and this allows them to do that. Also, the tables, they are meant to be moved around and be put together in order to accommodate larger groups. because they found out that Chinese people like to meet in larger groups and socialize when getting coffee or tea. Now, for product mix in China, before they even served coffee, they served tea products. This was in order for the Chinese people to become accustomed and comfortable with the brand of Starbucks. And once they realized this was a place they enjoyed going to for their tea, Starbucks could start to introduce their coffee products. Now, the second part of transnationalism is global integration. How you first integrate globally for Starbucks is from licensing. Now, Starbucks still has complete control these stores, but they partner with other people in order to make sure they successfully integrate into that new culture. What I mean by global vertical integration is that Starbucks completely controls their supply chain. So you can see from this picture down here, they control everything from the coffee farms to the factories for roasting the coffee, obviously all the way down to the coffee bars themselves. Now, this is very different from a normal transnationalist company. A normal transnationalist company would like to outsource as much as they can in order to get cheaper labor, cheaper materials, cheaper processes, because they often have low cost pressures in these new areas. Starbucks, on the other hand, doesn't really have low cost pressure. They are able to charge just as much as they would in the US or more in regions that they expand to. So this allows them to maintain their quality of coffee and their quality of experience in every Starbucks store across the world. And they are able to pay their farmers more and able to keep up higher ethical standards. What I mean by ubiquitous culture here is that whether or not you're in a Starbucks in the US or a Starbucks in China or anywhere, you're going to feel pretty similar. So when you walk into a Starbucks in the US, it's very comforting, it's very inclusive. You feel sort of at home. They're there to take care of you. If you were to go to a Starbucks in another country, it would feel very much the same. It's very inclusive and very comforting. The staff there are meant to cater to any need that you might have and make you feel comfortable. This is really what allows Starbucks to integrate globally and allows them to grow. Howard Schultz said himself that growth is not a strategy, but it's the Starbucks experience that they have created that allows them to grow so successfully. Now, I will hand it over to Sarah for functional level strategy.
Thank you, Colin. I will now talk about the functional level strategy of Starbucks. Starbucks has an economies of scale and has dominated their home market by over 50% of their competitors. They also have grown and expanded into international and global markets and have topped $16 billion in revenue, and also remain the top competitor for the coffee industry. As far as innovation goes, Starbucks is on top of their game. They have mobile orders to allow customers to get access to their drinks much quicker, reward systems to allow customers to get free drinks based on how many times they come into the store, and they also offer very high quality drinks. This relates to the efficiency and quality section. Starbucks treats their employees very well. They believe that employees are the center of their company and these are the ones who provide the value. And they also use the highest quality beans that they can to produce their coffee. For structure and control systems of Starbucks, they operate under a matrix organizational structure. This contains 4 levels: the functional hierarchy, which is the corporate level, the geographic, which is the regional, the product-based divisions, which is the products, and the teams, which is the cafe level. Starbucks also focuses on 3 main things: procurement, roasting beans, and employees. These are the 3 things that sets them apart from their competitors. As far as controls go, Starbucks is very concerned about the ownership of their stores. Schultz made it a point that they were not going to franchise their stores early on, and this caused a major issue in their growth. Now, Carl will discuss the social responsibility and ethical section.
Thank you, Sarah. Now we'll go ahead and talk about Starbucks' social responsibilities and ethics. Starbucks is socially responsible for their products, and the reason why I say is because they recently switched over to a more environmentally safe, biodegradable product. They are currently working on making the lid the same way. They also make sure that the beans that they get from South America are picked, right time in the season, and also going to make sure there's no pesticides or anything that could harm the bean or the environment down there. CAFE is Coffee and Farmers Equity, and what that means is that Starbucks partnered with a corporation to make sure that the farmers and pickers down in South America get paid higher wages than other farmers that don't work for Starbucks. And the reason why they want to do that is because they want to make sure that the farmers are happy and then they stay healthy and they go ahead and continue to pick the crops when they need to. Moving on down to employee benefits is that Starbucks offers stock options for the part-time employees, which is really not really heard of these days. When Starbucks first decided to do this, the stockholders balked at it. They didn't want to do it at all because they're afraid it's going to dilute the shares. But over time, they realized it doesn't dilute the shares, and they went ahead and agreed to this. In order for the part-time employees, in order to get the stock options, they have to be there for a certain period of time. Paid education, not too many corporations actually give paid education. I've only worked for a few out of my 30-year career. And that's a great thing because they want you to make sure that you're educated and that you continue personal development, which is a great thing. And the part-time employees get that as well. It's a great feature. Moving on down to health benefits, everybody that works at Starbucks, from full-time to temporary to part-time, all get health benefits after a certain period of time. And that's something that you don't even hear of. I know teachers that are substitutes that work part-time, they don't get any health benefits. They have to pay it out of their own pocket. And so I think when Starbucks actually gives these benefits to the employees, they make the employees a lot happier, which in turn makes a better product for their customer. Now we'll go ahead and turn our attentions over to John, and he'll go ahead and do our financial analysis.
All right. Thank you, Carl. So to get started here, I've pulled up table 1, which is the financial results for Starbucks from the year 2014. And the reason I've done that is just so in case you guys have any questions about any of the financial ratios I'm about to put forward, at the end when we're done, I can refer back to it if you guys have any questions. To get started here, I started with return on assets. So return on assets is a measurement of profits over the total resources used during a specific time period. As you can see here, Starbucks came in at 23.14%, McDonald's at 13.42%, and Dunkin' at 5.50%. And the reason that I'm showing that is because return on assets and Starbucks' very high return on assets shows how the company has superior business practices. They result in more profits from their input that they put in, more so than McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts. The second one that I put forward here is market capitalization, which is a measure of the company's establishment and strength within a specific industry. Starbucks comes in at 112.68 billion market cap, McDonald's with 90.22 billion, and Dunkin' with 4.43. And the way that you find that is by taking the price of one share of any of these companies and multiplying it by the total outstanding shares that are available for purchase. The final one that I had to show here was debt to equity. And this is, I think, a good one because it, like I said here, it shows how risky the firm is in terms of the amount of debt that it holds. So Starbucks comes in at the lowest debt to equity, which is an indication that it's very risk averse. So Starbucks at 0.34, McDonald's 1.17, and Dunkin' Donuts 4.94. Basically, in the next slide, what I'm going to do is I'm going to discuss how, although Starbucks has a very low debt to equity here, and some people view that as a good thing because they're at no risk of bankruptcy. I'm going to explain how increasing that ratio can actually allow the company to be more successful if they increase it only slightly. Our recommendation is that in terms of the financials, Starbucks needs to acquire more debt. So their debt to equity is rather low at 0.32, and most financial analysts actually recommend keeping the debt to equity at or near 0.5. And the reason for this is that, when you take out a new loan, that increasing amount of debt, it allows for significant business expansion. So you can think about how when a company takes out a loan, it could be for any purpose, but it's going to be used to expand and grow parts of the business that they perceive as lacking. Continuing on with the recommendations from the SWOT analysis are to continue expanding outside of the United States to make sure the market doesn't get saturated. Continue to diversify the product offering through startup acquisitions. Diversification will act as a barrier to imitation and expands our product offering. You can think along the lines of the acquisition of La Boulance. And then just to wrap things up here, our recommendation after our full analysis of Starbucks as a company is definitely a strong buy. When it came to the financial analysis, they were either at the top or a market leader in 7 different ratios. And then in terms of just the coffee industry as a whole, they've really established themselves as a global leader in that sector. And then when you think about their corporate structure and the business processes that they utilize, they've really become a sort of a role model almost for other companies. And then just to round it out, their high emphasis on product innovation and overall customer experience is really, at the end of the day, what's going to bring them across the line and allow them to get that dominant market share in the coffee industry. At this time, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask. All right, thank you.